Republicans in the House and Senate appeared ready to follow through on a path forward to fully funding the Homeland Security Department. The measure would exclude funding for immigration and customs enforcement and the Border Patrol and would be fast-tracked separately. House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune announced the move in a joint statement. They said it would take place in the coming days. Alongside this, Republicans are preparing a budget package that would fund ICE and the Border Patrol through the remainder of President Trump's term. President Trump hosted an Easter lunch today at the White House. While delivering his remarks, Trump touted what he called U.S. military success in Iran while criticizing NATO.
You see how serious they were with the conventional ballistic missiles. They have thousands of them. We've blown most of them up. You notice every week it gets a little less at us and at our allies. We've had some very good allies over there. We've had some very bad allies in NATO. I hope you're all watching that, Scott, because we had some asks. And, you know, we spend trillions of dollars on NATO. And when we need them, which we never do, we didn't need them here either. To be honest, I was really asking because I wanted to see what they do. We didn't need them. We blasted the hell out of them, out of Iran. And the last thing I needed was NATO stepping in our way, because they're a paper tiger.
Trump touched on a number of topics during today's White House lunch. The president spoke about the Supreme Court hearing arguments on birthright citizenship. Criticizing justices appointed by Democrats, Trump also touted his White House ballroom project, which he said was ahead of schedule and under budget. However, he criticized a judge's ruling halting construction until the project receives approval from Congress. A U.S. firm has acquired one of the world's largest cobalt producers, located in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's one of the few remaining mines not already in the hands of China. Virtuous Minerals is buying the mining company Chemaf for $30 million. That's despite the fact the cobalt producer has racked up $1 billion in debt. Cobalt is a metal used in jet fighters, mobile phones, and electric vehicle batteries. The company's mining operations are capable of producing around 5% of the world's cobalt. It's a huge win in the race against China to shore up critical mineral production in the Congo. Virtuous says it aims to sell all its future production to American or U.S.-aligned buyers. A British Royal Navy captain has stepped back from his duties after an internal investigation found that he had exchanged text messages with a British lawmaker whose husband is facing allegations of spying for China. The senior officer was in charge of one of Britain's nuclear-armed submarines. The investigation found that he sent and received inappropriate text messages with Parliament member Joanne Reid, which posed a risk of blackmail. Reid's husband is currently under investigation for allegations of spying for China. The Navy captain withdrew from his duties this week but has not left the service completely. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is revoking the U.S. citizenship of a California couple originally from China 4 years after they pled guilty to stealing trade secrets and wire fraud. A federal judge in California approved the Justice Department's request to revoke the citizenship of Yu Zhou and Li Chen. The judge found they had committed crimes involving, quote, moral turpitude, given they were legally required to show upstanding character as part of their immigration process. Federal law allows the DOJ to revoke citizenship of naturalized immigrants. That's if they conceal or misrepresent important facts when obtaining citizenship. In Trump's second term, the Justice Department has stripped the citizenship of 13 naturalized immigrants. There are 16 cases pending. In a statement, Attorney General Pam Bondi said gaining citizenship after committing serious crimes against the American people is an unacceptable abuse of our immigration system, adding that denaturalization shows the DOJ's push to ensure that citizenship remains a privilege to obtain, not a right to abuse. Chen and Zhou were both researchers at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Ohio. They arrived in the U.S. on H-1B visas for highly skilled workers. They admitted in 2020 to plotting to steal trade secrets about pediatric medical treatment for financial gain. Last week, the DOJ stripped citizenships from Ukraine and Cuban natives who committed crimes. The department has identified denaturalization as one of its top priorities. The Supreme Court hearing arguments today on a very important issue for the White House that deals with President Trump's executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship. The president sitting in the courtroom today as well, and NTD's Arleen Richards was also in the courtroom. Arleen, this is the first time that a U.S. president has attended oral arguments at the Supreme Court. What was the mood like in the courtroom?
Well, Don, I have to say that the mood was a little bit more subdued than I had expected on this particular oral argument. I was expecting there to be a lot of fiery exchanges between the Supreme Court justices and the attorneys, particularly between the Supreme Court justices and the Solicitor General, who represents the Trump administration. But it was really quite subdued. The questions were kind of soft, but they did get to the points that they wanted to get to the bottom of some of the reasoning for why President Trump wants to change this law. President Trump was sitting up in the front row right behind the Solicitor General as he gave his arguments. And I'm not sure if that was why it was more subdued, but certainly his presence was noticed by everyone in the room. And it was a packed courtroom today as well.
And can you tell us, Arleen, what was the focus of the arguments?
So as you know, Don, this was a case about President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship and whether or not it complies with the citizenship clause in the 14th Amendment. Now, the plaintiffs were arguing that this clause has allowed for all children to become citizens who are born in the United States. But President Trump has said, there's a misunderstanding all these years, over 100 years, there's been a misunderstanding of the clause. And he says that any child born to parents who are here either temporarily on a visa or who are here illegally cannot become a citizen. So the focus here today was on this phrase, subject to the jurisdiction hereof, which is a phrase that's contained in that clause. And the Solicitor General took it a step further and said any child or parent who are here subject to the jurisdiction must be domiciled. So let's listen to how he explained domicile and how that fits into the clause.
If you look at the text of the clause, we believe it says, born in the United States, born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the states of which they reside. So there's a constitutional guarantee that applies to both federal or national and state citizenship. And the key point we make there is that word reside, if you look at, for example, Section 1473 of Justice Story's commentaries, was understood to mean domicile. So when they say subject to the jurisdiction, and then they go on to say you're a citizen of the United States and the state in which they reside, the very text of the clause itself presupposes that the citizen is domiciled in the United States.
Now, the Justices Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett seem to have the most questions or challenges about this word domicile, and they both had different angles on which they addressed it. One was from the standpoint of slaves being in the United States and this clause being a way to address slaves seeking citizenship, and the other was whether or not the persons intended to stay here. So let's listen to their challenges.
Here's where I'm going with it. I'm just working within your argument for a moment. Today, you can point to laws against immigration that are much more restrictive than they were in 1860. We really didn't have laws like that we do today until maybe 1880. So if somebody showed up here in 1868 and established domicile, that was perfectly fine without respect to anything, any immigration laws. There they were. And so why wouldn't we, even if we were to apply your own test, come to the conclusion that the fact that someone might be illegal is immaterial?
In your reply brief, that the children of slaves who were brought here unlawfully, in defiance of laws forbidding the slave trade, would in fact be citizens. And yes, we can imagine that their parents were not only brought here in violation of United States law, but were here against their will, and so maybe felt allegiance to the countries where they were from. And you say that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put all slaves on equal footing, newly freed slaves on equal footing, and so they would be citizens. But that's not textual. So how do you get there? You say it in just a few sentences, so can you elaborate?
Now, all of the justices asked pretty similar questions to the plaintiff's attorney about jurisdiction and domicile. And the plaintiff's attorney basically said that domicile wasn't relevant here. And a lot of the justices wanted to get her take on, what subject to jurisdiction thereof meant and how it applied in this case. And of course, she hammered home her argument that this clause has applied to all children born in the United States since the late 1800s. I feel like the justices in general, I can't really tell today where they're leaning, but I think in general, they're reluctant to want to change a law that's been in place for over 100 years, that's been followed in one certain way, and now change the rule. Because one of the questions that was asked was, how would that look? How would we do that? And Justice Amy Coney Barrett said it could be a mess. So we're going to hear their ruling on this by June, late June or July. Back to you, Don.
All right, Arleen, the kids behind you are very enthusiastic about your report. Thank you very much. The Supreme Court hearing arguments in President Trump's bid to limit birthright citizenship. Joining us now is Collie Stimeson, Senior Legal Fellow and Senior Advisor to the President at the Heritage Foundation. Good afternoon, Collie. So the President attending the oral arguments today, appearance is historic, his appearance. Anything to be said about his presence in your view?
Well, it's unique. It's very Trumpian. Presidents in the past haven't done so, I think, out of due respect to a co-equal branch of the government. But I don't think that'll have any impact on how the justices are going to rule ultimately in June.
Right. Okay. And the hearing was around 90 minutes. I think you were tuning into it. Can you just give us to you what stood out during this oral argument?
So the oral arguments were presented by the Solicitor General of the United States and the head of the ACLU. They both did an outstanding job representing their respective arguments that they'd put in writing, of course, before the hearing. The first thing that jumped out to me is that John Sauer, the Solicitor General, mentioned in answering a question that if the court were to rule for the government, in other words, uphold the executive order banning birthright citizenship under the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, that it would only be applied prospectively, not retroactively. So that was sort of a news item. The rest of the argument was really what I expected to hear based on the written briefings, and they focused on what subject to the jurisdiction thereof means and their interpretation of this case called Wong Kim Ark, whether that decision stood for birthright citizenship or actually supported the government's position that it did not stand for birthright citizenship.
Okay, so on the phrase "subject to the jurisdiction thereof," can we get your comments on that? In terms of what does it mean, the jurisdiction of the United States?
Right. So that was what a lot of the arguments centered around. So the president and those on his side say that the original public meaning of that phrase means political allegiance to the United States. So it would exclude children born to illegal aliens. It obviously excludes children born to foreign diplomats or an invading force. The ACLU's argument and the certified class of people who were born to parents illegally here in the United States say, no. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof means subject to the civil and criminal laws of the United States. That if you're an illegal alien and you're in this country and you commit a crime, you can be prosecuted. So you are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And birthright citizenship has been the norm for a long time. So don't disrupt the norm.
Okay, what is your view? What is your position on the consequences or the impacts of automatic birthright citizenship so far on the United States?
Well, I think it goes beyond any question that we're an outlier country. No country in Europe allows for birthright citizenship. But as a policy matter and as a legal matter, we have interpreted the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment to allow for birthright citizenship. And so the reason that other countries don't do it and we do it is in the case of the United States, it acts as a magnet for people to come here illegally, have a child here in the country, and then that child sponsors the parents, and then we have this chain migration or birth tourism, which we have in the United States. And so if the court were to side with the president and applied this constitutional interpretation prospectively, it would turn off that incentive. It would be seen as a shot heard around the world to some folks who want birthright citizenship. But I think it would be just implemented like any other Supreme Court rule. And it doesn't mean illegal immigration will stop. It just means that an illegal who has a baby in this country wouldn't have the privilege of citizenship for their child and then themselves and their extended family members.
Okay, I'm wondering as well if you could explain, is there a national security aspect to this as well? Is there an argument that allowing foreigners from adversarial countries, for example, like China, to come to the U.S. and give birth to U.S. citizens, and those citizens whose allegiance may not be the United States, is there an argument for that?
Obviously, and you made it. And actually, it was brought up during the argument in the court. Chief Justice John Roberts asked, he said, even though, we don't focus on policy, what is the estimate of how many children who are born, who are from illegal aliens are born in the United States? And John Sauer, the Solicitor General, said, well, by some estimates, there's already been 1.5 million Chinese babies born to illegal aliens here in the United States. And he also pointed out that according to another organization, there are 500 companies in China that focus on getting Chinese people into the United States or into the territories for the purpose of establishing birthright citizenship. Now, the court will not rule on the policies and the policy implications of their rulings should not be part of any proper constitutionalist ruling, but that is sort of floating around the sidelines of this case.
So another topic during today's hearing was implementation, and you mentioned that briefly in an earlier comment. Where do you stand? What is your position of implementation of no automatic birthright citizenship? I mean, would every hospital then have to check patients or parents' immigration status?
So Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, others asked exactly that. How would this practicably be implemented? I mean, and the Solicitor General said, well, by the way, when a child is born in the United States today, they are given citizenship immediately, no matter who they are. But he didn't have a fleshed out answer for how it would be implemented. And I don't think anyone really knows exactly how it would be implemented. Somehow, the only thing he did say is that that family who would be denied citizenship for their child who was born would affirmatively have to petition the government for citizenship to say, no, actually we are citizens, and the burden would be on them to prove that they are a citizen, thus allowing their child to get citizenship. But I don't think anyone really has an answer to that question.
All right, let me just ask you one last question here. It's been a great discussion, but what would you think would be the impacts, if the Supreme Court upholds birthright citizenship, that anyone born in the U.S. is automatically a citizen?
No one would feel any different than they feel right now. That's the state of the law in the land. If the court sides with the ACLU and against the Trump's executive order, it'll be just like we felt this morning and yesterday and 10 months ago and 10 years ago. Birthright citizenship has been the norm in this country. So if the court sides with the ACLU, nothing changes. It just depends on how they write the decision and whether they rule on the constitutional side of it or whether they rely on a statute. When asked which she would prefer, the ACLU lawyer says, well, we'd like to win either way, but we would prefer the constitutional route because that will cement things for the future.
Well, all right, colleague, good to speak with you today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And the fight over birthright citizenship isn't just about today's politics. It goes back more than 150 years. The 14th Amendment was designed to settle who is an American after the Civil War. But now questions over its meaning and its impact are back in the spotlight. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley takes a closer look.
To understand today's fight, you have to go back to the aftermath of the Civil War. In 1866, Congress passed the 14th Amendment, guaranteeing citizenship to everyone born in the U.S. The goal was to ensure that formerly enslaved people were recognized as American citizens, overturning the infamous Dred Scott decision. Now it reads that all persons born or naturalized in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the U.S. and of the state wherein they reside. What's up for debate here is this phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, where the Trump administration argues that this does not apply to illegal immigrants. Still, though, for more than a century, courts have largely interpreted this amendment broadly, granting citizenship to nearly anyone born on U.S. soil. On day one in office, President Trump signed an executive order that bans children born to illegal immigrants or temporary residents from automatically becoming citizens, saying the system is being abused.
All of this, everything having to do with birthright citizenship, it was at the end of the Civil War. The reason was it had to do with the babies of slaves and the protection of the babies of slaves. It didn't have to do with the protection of multi-millionaires and billionaires wanting to have their children get an American citizenship.
According to Pew Research, about 260,000 children are born each year in the U.S. to parents who are illegal immigrants or not permanent residents. That's roughly 7% of all births. Now, most coming from neighboring countries like Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras. But the issue stretches beyond the Western Hemisphere.
Chinese billionaires or billionaires from other countries who all of a sudden have 75 children or 59 children in one case or 10 children becoming American citizens.
China ranks among the top countries, linked in part to what's known as birth tourism, when foreign nationals travel to the U.S. specifically to give birth so their children can gain American citizenship.
The Chinese government, the CCP, is using birth tourism on an industrial scale. The Chinese government and some research firms say that over the past roughly 13 years, you have anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 Chinese nationals a year doing this for 13 years.
Some analysts warn that the practice could carry long-term national security concerns.
Chinese nationals are flying to the United States, giving birth here, and then flying home with the baby, raising them in communist China. And then when they turn 18, they're going to be citizens, they can vote. It's the way to kind of remake society in the vision that they want.
Now, as the Supreme Court is set to rule on this issue, it could fundamentally reshape American immigration policy going forward. For NTD News Washington, I'm Jack Bradley.
Different government agencies took to social media today to mark April Fool's Day. In a post on X, the National Archives shared what it said was a group chat between the Founding Fathers. The post depicts a satirical discussion between the nation's early leaders about the signing of the Declaration of Independence. The National Park Service also took the opportunity to have some fun. The agency posted a picture of a cherry tree on X, claiming it was the same one George Washington had cut down. The Park Service said it had grown back on the grounds of the Washington Monument ahead of America's 250th anniversary of independence. The Department of Interior joined in, posting that it was reviewing wildlife names to better reflect the nation's history and character. The department said it had renamed the raccoon the Liberty Bandit, effective today, April 1st. NASA is getting ready to launch 3 U.S. astronauts and a Canadian on humanity's first crewed lunar voyage in more than half a century. It's a 10-day flight around the moon and back that will mark the second mission of Artemis, successor to the Apollo program of the Cold War era. Take a look.
The closeout crew while they're in there.
That's actually a good point, yeah. And so as we continue to watch the crew prepare to close the launch abort system hatch, why don't we take a look at the crew's mission patch? Now, crews have designed their official mission patches since the Gemini 5 launch in 1965. Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy, they really wanted to play on the abbreviation of Artemis II to all, signifying not only the second major flight of the Artemis program, but also a mission to explore for all, by all. The crew chose the iconic Earthrise photo for a reason. It was taken by the Apollo 8 crew in 1968, the first crew to ever fly around the moon. The mission was to prove teams then were ready to land on the moon the same way Artemis II hopes to fly around the moon ahead of a lunar landing with Artemis IV. This time, as we've been saying throughout the broadcast, to stay on the moon and pave the way to Mars.
Yeah, we talk about incremental steps, right? And so Artemis II is very similar to Apollo 8 in terms of that increment. They're going to fly around the moon and set up the rest of the Artemis program for landing on the moon, but also with a nod towards the fact that we do this for all humanity. And I love the thoughtfulness and how much importance they put on their patch design.
Another camera angle of inside the Orion spacecraft.
I was going to say we might be able to see Rise, but I think it's right behind Reed's foot there.
And so to orient people again, so basically we have Christina in your upper right-hand, Christina in your upper left-hand corner. Then you have Jeremy below her. And then the feet you're seeing, those are Reed's feet. And then next to him, the upper right-hand corner, that is Victor, who's unfortunately hidden by Reed's feet, but again, that is the orientation of the crew inside Orion right now. Now, earlier this week, the crew got to stick their patch on a wall just outside the suit-up room. You can play that video there now. You can see that crews have been doing this as part of a pre-flight tradition again. Wow, Reed just making sure that thing won't come
sure
off.
It's flat.
And so now Victor is signing there, followed by Christina, and then Jeremy. That's a fun tradition, and your patch is up there too.
It is, yeah, ours is on the left-hand side there. It's a fun tradition. This is a really fun day too. You know, they did this a couple days ago, but it's just another step that makes it a little bit more real that you're going to be launching soon.
Again, we talked a little bit about this before. The basically like a computer there on Jeremy's leg, a way for him to just check out the data, see some of the data that also Reed and Victor are getting to see, but in those much bigger displays for Orion.
Right, yeah, it's basically a tablet on his leg, and it's actually plugged into a cord nearby that allows him to have a screen repeater so he can see what they're looking at.
And it looks like he's taking notes. Can you talk a little bit about what that is? It's part of, all of them have like a little procedural book, right?
Right, yeah, so they have what we call a knee board, and they'll have blank.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. A packed Supreme Court today as President Trump attends oral arguments on birthright citizenship at the Supreme Court hearing. Arleen Richards was there and with the latest. President Trump says Iran is now asking for a ceasefire. What the White House says about NTD and what they told about the president's major speech tonight, and how the Pentagon is providing the commander-in-chief with military options. President Trump says Iran's new leader is seeking a ceasefire, but he says, first, the Strait of Hormuz needs to be reopened. The Pentagon will triple production of radars for an anti-missile defense system, what the system does and how this fits into the Pentagon's broader strategy. The FBI arrests a sex offender accused of illegally voting. The Bureau says the individual voted in 2 different elections. Moms for America hosting a special tea and luncheon in Georgetown, kicking off America's 250th birthday by placing mothers past and present at the center of America's history.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Our first story, President Trump says he's received a ceasefire offer from Iran's new regime. He's set to address the nation at 9 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. Iris, good afternoon. What do we know so far about his speech tonight?
Good afternoon to you as well, Don. So as the president is set to address the nation and make what the White House calls an important speech on Iran tonight at 9 p.m., the White House tells NTD that the president is expected to reiterate his 2 to 3 week timetable for wrapping up the operation and also give an operation update. And it comes as the White House also tells us that the president will highlight the U.S. military's success in completing all of its stated military objectives, including one, taking out its Navy, destroying Iran's ballistic missiles and production facilities, also taking out its proxies in the region, making sure they can no longer destabilize the region, as well as making sure that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. And all this comes as the president this morning announcing that Iran's new leader has reached out to the U.S. asking for a ceasefire. He says that the U.S. will consider, quote, when Hormuz Strait is open, free, and clear, adding that until then, the U.S. will continue striking Iran. And here's the president speaking at the White House yesterday, again laying out that 2 to 3 week timeline while saying that Iran doesn't have to make a deal with the U.S. for the U.S. to call this operation a success and finish it. Watch.
I've had regime change. Now, regime change was not one of the things I had as a goal. I had one goal. They will have no nuclear weapon. And that goal has been attained. They will not have nuclear weapons. But we're finishing the job. And I think within maybe 2 weeks, maybe a couple of days longer to do the job. But we want to knock out every single thing there.
And the Pentagon is certainly giving the president more military options while negotiations are continuing. The Central Command this morning releasing new footage, they say showing USS Tripoli, an amphibious assault ship deployed to the Middle East region. And they say that the 3,500 sailors and Marines on that ship are right now maintaining peak warfighting capabilities and readiness. Back to you.
So, Iris, pivoting here to domestic policies, the president also just issuing a new demand for Republicans in Congress. Tell us more about that.
Sure. So on Truth Social, the president just now demanding that House and Senate Republicans come together to pass a full ICE and Border Patrol funding bill by June 1st. And that will be going around the 60-vote filibuster process. And instead, it means going through the party line process of budget reconciliation. In the meantime, he says the big, beautiful bill will fund ICE and Border Patrol. And here's the president over the weekend talking about the importance of funding them. Watch.
I think the Senate is playing it too soft. The Republicans are wonderful people, but we're dealing with very sick individuals. We have to protect our country. We have to protect our border.
And on another domestic topic here, the president this morning traveling from the White House to the Supreme Court to listen to the oral arguments in the case surrounding his executive order about birthright citizenship. And that marks the first time the U.S. sitting president attends the Supreme Court hearing, and the White House releasing new photos showing the president walking inside the Supreme Court as well as walking alongside Attorney General Pam Bondi. So more news to look for on that front as well, as we are waiting for the president to speak tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Back to you.
All right, Iris. Thank you. The Pentagon is planning to triple production of radars for the Patriot Advanced Capacity 3 anti-missile defense system. The Defense Department, or the Department of War, saying this is part of the broader effort to be on a wartime footing. The department announcing a landmark framework agreement in partnership with Boeing and Lockheed Martin. The Patriot Advanced Capability 3 is a missile system that intercepts enemy ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and aircraft. The radars will provide active measures and data to ensure precision. The Pentagon is calling the agreement a pivotal step in executing President Trump's vision to build the arsenal of freedom. They add the agreement shows that a resilient supply chain is paramount and the entire defense industrial base is postured to expand production. The U.S. today releasing new numbers on Operation Epic Fury in Iran. Washington is increasing its military activity while attacks from Iran are becoming less. NTD's international correspondent Arleen has more on the Iran war.
New numbers on the war against the Iranian regime. As of Wednesday, the U.S. conducted over 13,000 combat flights. In total, America's military struck over 12,300 targets. and US forces damaged or destroyed over 150 Iranian vessels. Because of America's strikes on Iran's military capabilities, attacks by the Iranian regime are becoming significantly less. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Iran launched only 3 missile barrages at Israel in the last 48 hours. This marks its lowest barrage rate of the war to date. Meanwhile, Israel is also increasing its attacks on Iran, releasing this video showing new numbers. The IDF says it has carried out over 800 airstrikes in the war so far, killing 2,000 Iranian soldiers. Israel launched the latest wave of attacks just on Wednesday morning. Israel also reports killing 2 more major targets. One was the commander of Hezbollah's southern front. He was a senior commander with 40+ years of experience. The other one was the head of the engineering branch of the Lebanon Corps in Iran. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
President Trump says Iran's new regime president asked the U.S. for a ceasefire. He says the U.S. will consider it when the Hormuz Strait is open. Joining us now is Gerard Filitti, Middle East affairs analyst and attorney specializing in international law. Gerard, good to see you. Good afternoon. So, in your view, do you think the U.S. needs to have the strait open before ending the war, or do you think that's not necessarily a priority?
It's a really tough question because it does depend on what President Trump sees as the U.S.'s priority. We don't get our oil through the Strait of Hormuz. We are domestically capable of producing what we need. So really, this is more an exercise of international maritime law of free transits through the strait, which America is very much interested in, but it's not a mandatory obligation for us to participate in. President Trump has made it clear that NATO countries, European countries, Asian countries need to step up and take part in reopening the strait. So I think that President Trump will not necessarily precondition any negotiations on the reopening of the strait, but I think that is an important objective to be met in terms of keeping the price of oil down internationally and making sure that economies don't suffer.
So President Trump has asked, as you said rightly, NATO countries to help out. And he's also said recently that NATO's a paper tiger. President Trump might consider pulling out of NATO. What is your stance? What do you say to NATO's response so far in terms of President Trump's requests? How has NATO responded in your view?
Well, NATO has certainly not responded the way that the United States would expect allies to respond. We've seen Spain refuse to allow American forces to use Spanish facilities or American facilities in Spain, American bases in Spain, to carry out exercises against Iran. We have seen that Italy and France have also put restrictions on the use of allied facilities in those countries. And that's certainly not how you would expect a NATO ally to act. You would expect them to allow American forces to operate freely when it is in international interests. That being said, these countries were not consulted with prior to the beginning of this engagement, so it's certainly understandable that they are somewhat upset that they were not included in the planning or the strategy for the actions that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel took. So ultimately, this is a balancing act of keeping your allies close and making sure that everyone is satisfied with the nature of the relationship. President Trump has made it clear that he's not.
Okay, let me get your view on this. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon said on Fox News that it's much more important this operation is successfully completed than what the market does. And we know the national average for gas is over $4 now. So what are your thoughts on this point?
I think he's right. I think that the ultimate issue here is what happens in the medium to long-term future. If we still have an Iranian regime that's very much the same as the old one, the IRGC in charge and continuing to be a threat to the region and to the world, then the market prices will suffer over time because you will have more of the same uncertainty and more of the same risk. So it's crucial that this be resolved in a way that you see stabilization of markets in the long term. In the short term, we will be suffering more at the pump. We will have an economic cost the longer the Gulf of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz stays closed. But we can deal with this in the short term, provided that there is a long-term solution that sees the reopening of Iran as a free market economy.
Okay, so talk to us about this long-term solution. What is that? President Trump said the war could end in 2 to 3 weeks. What are the possible paths for this war coming to a close that is acceptable in your view?
The ultimate issue is that there are many off-ramps that President Trump can take in terms of what he wants as an ultimate outcome. But there has been not that much transparency on the part of President Trump as to what he's actually trying to achieve, other than to end the Iranian threat to the region and make sure that they don't produce nuclear weapons or more ballistic missiles. Ultimately, it's possible for President Trump to say at any point that we've achieved our objectives, that we've sufficiently stopped the ability of the Iranian regime to produce weapons of mass destruction and dangerous missiles, but we retain the right to go back and continue military exercises and military action against Iran should they go back to making or trying to make weapons. That's the easiest off-ramp for President Trump, but it leaves very much the region uncertain and unstable, and it looks like America, for all intents and purposes, did not achieve all of its objectives, which for many rational people includes regime change.
So President Trump has said a regime has changed. Has the ideology of this regime changed, or is it still intact?
That's a very astute question, because the ideology has certainly not changed. The new regime is pretty much the same as the old regime, different names, same players. If anything, the IRGC has strengthened its position within the military, has strengthened its position within Iran at the expense of the governing theocracy, the mullahs, the ayatollahs, the religious elites. So if anything, this has consolidated power more into the military, the same military that's been responsible for developing nuclear weapons, for performing terrorist acts across the world. So we have a different regime, we have different people to negotiate with, but the ideology is absolutely the same, and it remains an existential threat to the United States and to the Middle East.
Okay, from your vantage point, Gerard, how do you get rid of this ideology?
This ideology has to be uprooted at the source. It's up to the people of Iran to help in taking their country back. Clearly, the United States is not looking for a long-term military endeavor in Iran with boots on the ground. NATO nations are not stepping up. We don't see other countries. We do see positive statements from Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia, like the UAE, who understand the threat that Iran is posing to them and their willingness to step up if needed. But in order to effect long-term change in Iran, you need a completely different system. So that does mean the overthrow of the rule of the Ayatollahs. It means the end of the Islamic Republic as it is, and giving the people an opportunity to develop a nation in their own way. Whether or not this happens, President Trump has always said that the people have the ability to take their country back. Whether it's time to push them to do that or not, that's ultimately a decision that President Trump and the people of Iran need to make.
Okay, so in terms of boots on the ground that you brought up, what do you think is the reason that more troops are being directed to the region? President Trump has put out threats against the critical infrastructure of Iran, water plants, electricity plants, and talking about taking over Karg Island. So what do you think about that?
Well, the most efficient way for from a military perspective to deal with the continuing threat of Iran is through airstrikes and the destruction of Karg Island and the destruction of Iran's energy production and infrastructure base, which would not require boots on the ground and would cause lasting damage to the Iranian economy. At the same time, that would cause standard of living decrease for the Iranian people. To put boots on the ground for Karg Island makes little sense, because essentially you'd be turning them into a target for Iranian assaults from rockets, drones, and missiles, which would not be very beneficial to the U.S. I could see a scenario where boots on the ground are used as a quick reaction force to seize nuclear materials or to seize other strategic objectives, for example, capturing certain high-level individuals or eliminating them. But I don't see a long, sustained, on-the-ground campaign. That does not make sense militarily.
Okay, Gerard, let me just ask you one more question here, and it's in regards to the administration's objective of eliminating possible manufacturing of nuclear weapons in Iran. So do you think President Trump told Reuters this in an interview that about the enriched uranium? He said that, quote, "It's so far underground, I don't care about that." In your view, should the U.S. extract the uranium that's left in Iran?
Well, we should care about that, because however deeply it's buried underground, and what President Trump means by that is we have used bunker buster bombs to basically seal that material deep underground, half a mile or a mile underground, or even more in some places. But that doesn't prevent Iran from digging new tunnels, from recovering the material with time. It just gives us more time to reinforce our military posture in the region. So ultimately, we do need to make sure that that material is either surrendered or acquired by force, because so long as Iran continues to have it on its soil, it remains a danger that they will reach it and manufacture it, refine it further, and make nuclear weapons.
Very intelligent analysis, Gerard. I continue to be surprised. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Always a pleasure, Don. Thank you.
President Trump signaling a possible major shift in U.S. foreign policy, saying he is strongly considering pulling out of NATO. The president called the alliance a paper tiger in an interview with the Telegraph newspaper, arguing it failed to support the U.S. during the war with Iran. Trump pointing to NATO allies' reluctance to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz as a breaking point. He says the U.S. has consistently stood by its partners, but says that support has not been returned. The president also criticizing the United Kingdom's military readiness and leadership priorities. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer was asked about President Trump's comments. He said he would act in his country's interest, whatever the noise. Starmer said in the UK's interest to have a strong relationship with the US and with Europe. And on defense and security, Starmer says the UK especially needs a stronger relationship with Europe. The UK leader says that in turn, it will help strengthen Britain's relationship with the US. Starmer says he has long argued that Europe should be doing more in that field. Britain's King Charles will address the U.S. Congress later this month during his visit to Washington. House Speaker Mike Johnson shared the news today. King Charles and his wife Queen Camilla will visit the U.S. to mark the 250th anniversary of independence from British rule. The high-profile trip comes as the British government hopes to repair relations with President Trump, which have been damaged by the Iran war. It will be the first state visit by a British monarch since 2007. King Charles's mother, Queen Elizabeth II, made that trip the fourth such U.S. visit of her reign. President Trump says the King and Queen's visit will begin on April 27th with a banquet dinner at the White House next day. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is signing the Sunshine State's version of the Save America Act. It aims to further bolster election integrity.
This bill protects and expands integrity in our voter registration process by requiring the verification of U.S. citizenship when you're doing your voter registration. Our Constitution in the state of Florida says only American citizens are allowed to vote in our elections. And so we need to make sure that that is the law.
The new law restricts the kinds of ID accepted at voting booths. For example, student IDs will no longer be accepted. The Florida SAVE Act will also mandate paper ballots in all elections. The governor says paper ballots are more secure and easier to verify in the case of a recount. The new law will not take effect until next year. Proponents say it will further prevent election fraud. Opponents argue that the law could negatively affect eligible voters who may not have citizenship documents readily available. The League of Women Voters of Florida and a coalition of advocacy groups are suing to block the law. The New York Auto Show comes around each year to Manhattan, and this year, America's 250th anniversary is a highlight. NTD's Shar Marshall spoke with some of the brands showcasing their limited edition vehicles. Take a look.
The very latest and greatest that the auto industry has to offer can be seen at the New York International Auto Show, and that includes America 250th anniversary editions. American brands have built the spirit of the United States right into the vehicles. People say freedom isn't free, and neither are these limited edition vehicles, but they are available, and they do represent the independence of the American auto industry.
So what I have behind me here is our concept of the America 250 edition of the Durango. So you'll see all the American flag liveries on the whole side of the vehicle. You got the black and the bronze accents, so that's on the wheels. You peer inside, you'll see the bronze accenting stitching all over too. This is our concept version. We actually reveal our true production version and release all the full details on that car at 11 o'clock today at the press conference.
Of course, you can never really have too many American flags, especially during America's 250th. Along with the flags all around the companies representing America's 250th, there are little flags and details that go into Chevrolet's 250th vehicles.
We are really excited to be here at the New York Auto Show in 2026. We're also really excited to celebrate America's 250th birthday. Right here beside me and behind me, we have a special collection that we're calling the Stars and Steel Collection to honor America's 250th birthday. What's even better is that $250 of every vehicle sold from this collection will be donated to veterans organizations. So we've got Chevy Silverado, Chevy Silverado EV, we've got the Colorado, we've got even the Corvette way down there, which is also a shining beam of light for this year's show.
Along with their line of SUVs and trucks, Chevrolet was nice enough to show off one of their super fast 250th Corvettes.
So behind us we have the Corvette ZR1X. This one is in our Stars and Steel edition, which is unique for 2026. But this is one of the quickest cars on Earth right now. It'll do 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds, quarter mile in under 9 seconds. It's capable of 233 miles an hour. So as you see it sitting here on the floor, obviously it's in black. It's got our American flag inspired graphics on the vehicle as well, but also some true performance bona fides here. You've got carbon fiber aero kit that provides so much downforce, over 1,000 pounds of downforce at top speed. Carbon fiber wheels, which save over 40 pounds of unsprung weight across the vehicle, and a true lap time enabler. If you look into the interior, it's well designed around the driver. So it's a truly driver-centric cockpit. You see the screens are angled toward the driver in here. You've got 3 screens that give you incredible performance data as you're driving, but also just those finer touch points. That's real carbon fiber across the interior. The red and black play off of each other well and lean into that American theme as well. Plus the just the stitching on the doors, the way it all comes across, nicely tied together.
For Wednesday and Thursday, the show is only open to the media. The show opens up to the public on Friday, April 3rd to April 12th. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
States that decline to opt into the Education Freedom Tax Credit could be giving up billions in education funding, according to the America First Policy Institute. Joining us now is Erica Donalds, founder of Education Freedom Foundation and chair of Education Opportunity at the America First Policy Institute. Erica, it's so good to have you here. Good afternoon. So before we get to the main topic here, Erica, I just wanted to get your quick comments on President Trump's presidential library in Florida. The first look of it was shared recently, and Eric Trump said that the landmark would be a tribute to an amazing man, an amazing developer, the greatest president our nation has ever known. Can we get your comments?
Well, as a 6th-generation Floridian, I am very excited to have our first presidential library, especially in Miami on the water. It is a beautiful building, and it looks like it's going to be a great attraction for people who are already coming to Florida, especially next to the Freedom Tower. I think it's going to be a very educational place for people to learn about the Trump presidency and the legacy that he leaves. He's already had a great track record and a record-breaking, presidency with 2 separate terms. So I think it's going to be a great attraction and really boost the economy of Miami, as well as be an amazing tribute. All right, well said.
So on the tax credit, education tax credit, it looks like more Democratic states are opting in. Still, some states refusing to opt in. So in regards to those states, why are they refusing to opt into this into this credit?
Well, as you've stated, I'm encouraged that many Democrat states governors who said previously that they did not think they were going to opt in, I think now that they see, using our calculator, the money that would be left on the table for their own citizens, private donations that could otherwise be used for educational expenses, they're softening their positions. One has already formally opted in, Colorado, but others have signaled that they will opt in when the Treasury rules come out this summer. I think that's very encouraging because we estimate that they would be leaving $23 billion on the table, affecting about 4 million children.
Okay, so give us more details on this. When a governor opts into the federal tax credit scholarship, what does it mean for families?
Well, first of all, the donors in that state can already donate $1,700 and receive a dollar for dollar tax credit, a decrease in their federal taxes to these scholarship funding organizations, nonprofits. But if they don't opt in, the families in their state cannot receive those scholarships from those donated funds, and they will go to other states that have opted in. If I'm a family in Pennsylvania and I need help paying for private school or tutoring or special needs services, I can donate that $1,700. But if Governor Shapiro doesn't opt in, my child cannot receive a scholarship to get the help he needs.
Okay, what do you see when it comes to demand from families for school choice?
We have seen demand explode all over the country. Everywhere that a school choice program has passed, we have exceeded the number of scholarships available. For example, in Texas, their brand new program, funded at $1 billion, had over 274,000 applications in just a little over a month's time. Unfortunately, because it was only $1 billion, that only covers about 80 to 90,000 students. In Tennessee, they're actually considering legislation right now to double the number of scholarships available because they only have 20,000, but they had 50,000 applications.
Okay, so what does the evidence show here about school choice and how it's working?
What's incredibly encouraging, there's been over 200 studies to study the outcome of school choice, the impact on students, whether that's academic performance, college going rates, college persistence, lack of discipline issues. And of those 200 studies, 83% of them showed positive effects of schools, including positive effects on the public school students that remain in the traditional system. The remaining studies that didn't show a positive effect showed no effect. None of them showed a negative effect. And we know that parents are far more satisfied when they have options.
Okay, Erica, can you respond to some arguments here? You know, critics sometimes say that school choice drains resources from public schools. How do you respond to that?
Well, I believe that we need a free market in education. And if a school is not serving a student's needs, not being responsive to family feedback, they should not continue to be funded with the dollars that follow that child. If there is no financial consequence to not meeting a child's needs, to schools that have, in some cases, 0% reading and math proficiency, they will continue to fail. The only way to increase performance across the board is to inject free market principles, just like every other industry in America, to help them to have the motivation and incentive to improve if they want to keep those dollars. Families have the right to select the education that is working best for their kids, and they need the funding to do so.
And with that being said, another benefit, would you say, for school choice is that it makes schools more accountable to parents and students as well?
Absolutely. That's exactly why I'm in this business, if you will, of helping every family get the education freedom that they deserve. Because I heard from parents as a former school board member, as a parent activist, and now as a school choice policy advocate, I hear from parents all the time who say, my school's not working for my child and they're not listening to what my feedback is about how my child can learn better. But I have this school over here that I would love to send my child to, and I think they're going to better meet his needs. I need the funding. I need the transportation. I need the ability to move my child so they can get what they need. Every family deserves that. We shouldn't have any wait lists for these programs. They should be fully funded, and every state should opt in to the federal tax credit scholarship.
Okay, Erica, just one final question here. What do you see as the trajectory for American education? For example, are you optimistic that we'll be in a better place in, say, 5-10 years from now?
I am, simply because there is more education freedom spreading across the country. And I think that that has a positive impact on both the schools of choice as well as the public school system. I am not optimistic about the traditional public school monopoly, because monopolies do not work. They do not work in this country. They do not serve their students well, their families well, and they don't serve the taxpayers well. We have been doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. We have to change the entire infrastructure of the system to more of a free market approach if we want more innovative options, more responsive, and more accountable options for families.
Okay, well said. Great to hear your thoughts today, Erica. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
NASA aims to launch 3 U.S. astronauts and a Canadian on humanity's first crewed lunar voyage in more than half a century. It's a 10-day flight around the moon and back, and that will mark the second mission of Artemis, successor to the Apollo program of the Cold War era.
The marching down the countdown timeline well.
And so Bill, again, number 3 there, he is holding a silver flex hose. That hose is what will be connected to Orion in order to do that cabin leak check. So again, it does seem like we continue to march down through the milestones in this countdown. Hopefully lifting off today within our 2-hour launch window that opens at 6:24 p.m. Now, right now, people inside the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex are learning about this mission. There are great exhibits there about the rocket and Orion, and of course, our Megan Carter with the moon board.
All right, Megan and Nicole, yeah, you mentioned that checklist before launch. That checklist is going to continue during the mission as well, as there are several vital objectives that we are hoping to accomplish with this mission. So we've talked about the rocket. We've talked a little bit about Orion. Obviously, during Artemis I, we had that test flight, and there were no humans on board. That is our one big difference for this one, and we are going to have that crew this time. So what are they going to be up to during this mission? Let me tell you just a little bit. Now, for Artemis I, like I mentioned, we were really focused on the SLS, making sure it had the power and capabilities that we needed. We were also checking out the Orion spacecraft in deep space environments, making sure that it was good to go. Now for Artemis II, we are going to be taking the testing for Orion to the next level by adding that human component. So those test objectives are going to start even before launch. Like you mentioned, they are out there making their way through that checklist. But these objectives are going to start now, and that includes safety. So one really great example of safety is going to be something called the egress baskets. They're out there in the spacecraft, obviously, and should a situation happen to come up, they are going to have something called the egress baskets they can get in, and those are going to zip line them essentially down to the ground within seconds to safety. Another great example of those safety procedures are going to be the LAS, or the Launch Abort System that I mentioned earlier. Just a reminder, that's the one that can pull the crew and capsule away from any danger within a few minutes of into the launch. Now, those are just a couple quick examples, but our recovery teams have been training extensively, quite a lot, to make sure that they are ready and prepared for any challenging situation that could possibly arise. All right. Several other objectives that we are going to be looking at are also going to be communication checkouts. That is going to be vital. I know we talked a little bit earlier about all the maneuvering that they're going to be able to do, but we want to make sure that they have full communication ability from space to ground so that we can fully support them here. We are also going to be checking out those life support systems. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the service module and what it is going to do for the crew, but we want to make sure that those life support systems are fully functioning, obviously, before we send them farther into deep space. That's going to be critical for them. So on top of being able to maneuver the spacecraft and check everything out, we are also going to be making sure that everything is fully functioning. So as you can see, big part of this mission is to make sure that the spacecraft, the hardware, and all the operations are working, and that the data is going to make sense. And speaking of recovery, we are also going to have the opportunity at Splashdown to recover that launch or that flight data, and we're going to be able to take that back, analyze it, and make sure there are if there are any enhancements we need or changes we need to make before our next missions, we'll be able to do so. So they're going to still lots to do. They're going to stay very busy, obviously. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Megan.
And that was NASA explaining for us what is involved in the crewed moon mission. We'll have more on that in the next hour. But taking a break, Florida Governor DeSantis signs his state's version of the Save America Act into law. Jason Blair has more. Stay tuned. NASA aims to launch 3 U.S. astronauts and a Canadian on humanity's first crewed lunar voyage in more than half a century. It's a 10-day flight around the moon and back that will mark the second mission of Artemis, successor to the Apollo program of the Cold War era.
Finish the ingress portion, as you heard in that procedure. So this is where the crew is going to start building their nest, if you will, running some procedures, getting the capsule ready for humans to be on board.
And now look at the clock, 3 hours, 30 minutes and counting until the opening of our 2-hour launch window, and we are pretty good on time. We are as we are expecting in terms of when ingress will be wrapping up soon. And so now let's bring Gary Jordan, again, our commentator inside of Mission Control at Houston. Gary, let's check in with you about mission preparations.
Hey, Megan, thank you. Yes, we're following along here in Mission Control Houston.
RTC copies.
And we'll stand by for those con checks. And again, we're waiting for those comm checks. We did confirm from our IVA officer here in Mission Control Houston that all 4 suits have plugged in umbilicals.
And CDR, NTD.
Go ahead, NTD.
Yeah, Reed, we're ready to proceed with the voice checks if you and everyone else is.
NTD, Integrity crew is ready for voice checks.
I copy that. And Integrity for the entire crew, comm check on Orion to Earth 1.
CDR. PLT.
And you were just watching astronauts before the launch of NASA's crewed mission to the moon, around the moon, and then back to the Earth. It's going to be a 10-day journey, roughly 600,000 miles. And this is going to take the crew beyond the far side of the moon and deeper into space than any human has ventured before. Okay, let's take a break now. A win for the U.S. in the race against China for critical minerals. One of the world's largest cobalt producers is now in the hands of a U.S. company that says it will only trade with America-aligned buyers. More news in just a moment. Don't go away.